mourning the passing of Pope Francis. The Vatican announced that the Pope died. He died at 7:35 this morning, local time.
Pope Francis has left behind a surprising fortune. Yes, you heard that correctly. The very same Pope known for driving a humble Ford Focus, living in a modest guest house, and refusing a paycheck has now shocked the world from beyond the grave. It's believed that those working and residing in the Vatican or Rome earn salaries between €4,000 to €5,000 per month. So, when his family uncovered what he left behind, it moved them to tears. Jesse Waters has been reporting on the Pope's sealed last will and testament, which is now turning heads inside the Vatican and raising one major question: how could a man who appeared to own so little leave behind something so significant? One group even visited the Pope to present him with a certificate naming him an honorary member of their blood donor volunteer group. But what was inside the envelope he left behind wasn't just about money, it represented something far more powerful. From the very beginning of his papacy in 2013, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, now Pope Francis, made it clear that he wouldn't be a traditional pope. He rejected the ornate red shoes and luxurious apostolic palace, choosing instead to reside in a small guest house room. He welcomed visitors with humility, kindness, and, if they were lucky, a simple meal. To many, he became a pope of the people, someone who lived modestly and stayed grounded despite his title. Unlike previous popes, Francis declined the traditional papal salary, which was estimated at around $32,000 per month. He openly stated that he didn't need the money and didn't want to be isolated by status, wealth, or power. In interviews, he dismissed questions about retirement benefits, private property, or personal security. He famously said, "The shepherd must smell like the sheep." That belief shaped his daily life for more than a decade, from serving the poor to walking through the Vatican without an entourage. Even his transportation choices reflected his values. While previous popes traveled in black luxury cars or limousines, Francis often rode in a worn-out Ford Focus. He once blessed a group of 35,000 Harley-Davidson bikers in St. Peter's Square, gave away a Harley he was gifted, sold a luxury car for charity, and urged bishops to avoid flashy vehicles. To most observers, the message was crystal clear: Pope Francis had no interest in wealth, even when it was offered. So when people talked about the Vatican's enormous fortune, estimated at $10 to $15 billion, no one linked it personally to him. That was institutional wealth, not his. He didn't live lavishly or act like royalty. He avoided expensive renovations and was often found spending time with janitors rather than dignitaries. He frequently prayed alone, slipped out at night to visit the homeless, and spent time with the forgotten. Public records reflected his simplicity: no known bank accounts, no property, no trust funds. For years, insiders believed that if he left anything at all, it would be nothing more than a few books and a well-used Bible. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Despite all the signs of minimalism, quiet whispers began to circulate, soft rumors about what happened to the salary he declined. No one took it seriously at the time. After all, it was the Vatican, a place known for its secrecy. But now, in the days following his death, people are starting to re-examine those whispers. Did he truly decline everything? Or was there more complexity behind his decisions? And if he really had nothing, why did a woman in Argentina break down in tears upon reading a letter he left behind? To understand that, we need to look at how Pope Francis quietly managed his affairs. While he had no desire for material wealth, he cared deeply for people, especially those who stood beside him before the fame and robes. Some of those people were never forgotten. Even without saying a word, Francis may have been setting something aside, not for himself, but for someone who meant more to him than riches. And that changes everything. It's easy to assume that rejecting a salary means the money disappears. But the Vatican doesn't work that way. According to insiders, when a pope refuses his monthly income, the money doesn't vanish. Instead, there's a little-known internal mechanism. Those unused funds are quietly redirected, sometimes charitable funds are directed toward foundations, and at times, with the Pope's authorization, they are placed into holding accounts reserved for future use. During one particular audience, a group approached Pope Francis to present him with a certificate, honoring him as an honorary member of the Frat Res of San Casiano Blood Donor Volunteers. While Pope Francis officially declined receiving a salary, sources suggest the Vatican continued to allocate a budget for it behind the scenes. Employees working at the Vatican or living in Rome are generally believed to earn between €4,000 and €5,000 monthly. According to insiders, a portion of that amount was gradually deposited into a trust under the Pope's name, not for personal spending, but for discretionary use. These funds, by their very nature, remained confidential and unannounced. It may seem contradictory, a man devoted to simplicity still having access to significant financial resources. Yet, Francis followed the path of Christ, which began on the margins and led toward the poor. His mission was never about appearances, but about genuine intent. And sometimes, intent conceals more than it reveals. Historically, popes made liberal use of their stipends, funding travel, gifts, personal expenses, and occasionally even planning for retirement. Francis, in contrast, channeled most of his budget into social programs, particularly those connected to Argentina, his homeland. Although he became Pope to the world, he remained emotionally rooted in Argentina. He supported orphanages, funded medical care for low-income families, and provided scholarships to seminarians from underserved regions. Some of these efforts were public, many were not. Notably, he never created a personal foundation in his name, unlike many modern religious or public figures. There were no monuments, no institutions bearing the name Francis. However, reports now indicate that he worked through intermediaries, allegedly two individuals tied to Jesuit financial networks in Latin America, who helped build and manage a discreet trust that steadily grew over the years. The secrecy, some insiders say, was Francis' way of honoring his vow of poverty while still ensuring he could give generously. Publicly, he lived modestly in a guest house. Privately, he may have been managing what he saw as a justifiable legacy, one entirely intended for others. What most didn't know is that this fund may have also had a deeply personal purpose. Pope Francis rarely mentioned his family, and when he did, it was with a quiet fondness. He once referred to his sister, Maria Elena, in an interview, describing her as the one person who remembers who I was before all this. That quote didn't draw much attention at the time. Now, it carries more weight. Maria Elena, who continued living a humble life in Argentina, never benefited from her brother's position. Even as her health declined, she avoided public events, stayed out of the media, and never sought recognition. Still, those close to the situation say Francis remained in close contact with her, sending weekly letters, not just full of love but of quiet reassurance. Some now believe those letters were meant to prepare her for something he had planned for years. That something had been steadily growing all along. While the public admired Francis for his modest lifestyle, the trust remained untouched. It was invested conservatively, no high-risk ventures, no extravagant profits, just slow, steady growth. Over time, it accumulated into something meaningful, more than a symbolic gesture. Now that Pope Francis is gone, these carefully managed financial decisions are beginning to emerge. And they don't look like random acts. They resemble a carefully considered parting gift. And it may take just one envelope to set everything in motion. To Maria Elena Bergoglio, Francis was never the Pope. He was simply Jorge, her older brother. The one who held her hand on the way to school, stood up to bullies, and after their father's death, quietly took on a parental role without needing to say so. Their relationship was grounded in the rhythms of ordinary life in Buenos Aires, in a house more familiar with prayer than with luxury. When Jorge became Pope in 2013, Maria Elena didn't attend the ceremony in Rome. Not because she didn't care, but because he asked her not to. He told her the money she would spend traveling could help someone in need instead. "Pray from home," he said. "That's more than enough." And she did, faithfully, every single day. Despite the distance, they never lost touch. Even as Francis was swept into the duties of global leadership. Through handwritten letters, brief phone calls, and the occasional recorded message, the siblings managed to stay in touch. He never signed off as Pope Francis, only with a simple H. His letters often ended with a phrase she came to cherish: "Cadate, Hermanita, take care, little sister." Back in Argentina, her life remained quietly unassuming. No press waiting outside her door, no tell-all interviews. Though the media tried to reach her over the years, she offered very little. She lived modestly, raised her family, worked when she could, and endured serious health struggles, including a stroke that nearly robbed her of her voice. Still, he was always there, if not in person, then in spirit and prayer, and frequently on the other end of the phone. There's a kind of loyalty that doesn't make the news. Maria Elena lived it. She never once asked her brother for special treatment, nor did she try to benefit from his high status. She even declined invitations to Vatican events, insisting she didn't want to distract him or seem like she was enjoying privileges others weren't. Yet Francis never forgot her sacrifices. More importantly, he never forgot that she was the last remaining member of his immediate family. He carried that fact with him, quietly, like many of his personal burdens. In his final years, particularly following several health scares, those close to him noticed a change. He began asking questions about legal matters, about trusts, and about ensuring certain things were handled discreetly but meaningfully. He never spoke her name aloud in these conversations, but everyone knew who he had in mind. When his health rapidly deteriorated in early 2025, Vatican aides confirmed that one of his final personal requests was to send a sealed document to Argentina, delivered securely, to a woman who had never stepped foot inside the apostolic palace. That woman, of course, was Maria Elena. When the envelope arrived, she didn't open it right away. According to neighbors, she simply held it close to her chest for a long time, as though embracing a final memory. Its contents remained a mystery, at least for the moment. But one thing was certain: the bond between them had endured it all. The church, the fame, the long distance, even death. She wasn't just the Pope's sister. She was the one person who reminded him of who he truly was before the world knew him as Holy Father. Now, she was about to uncover what he had quietly left behind. As the world mourned his passing, the rituals began. Vatican doors were sealed, bells rang out, and flags flew at half-mast around the globe. A monumental moment for 1.3 billion Catholics. Pope Francis was gone. But in Argentina, the grief felt quieter. More intimate. Maria Elena did not travel to Rome, her health simply wouldn't allow it. She remained home, wrapped in silence, until a man in a dark suit came to her door with an envelope. He said nothing, only gave a respectful nod before leaving. The envelope appeared simple, thick cream paper, sealed with red wax. No public announcement. No media spectacle. Yet what it contained would soon spark one of the most surprising revelations in the legacy of the humble Pope. Nearly 7,000 miles away, another moment was unfolding, this one on American television. Jesse Waters sat at his news desk, a familiar smirk on his face, a stack of papers before him. He started boldly, "We've got the Pope's last will and testament." And what followed was far from what anyone had expected. Pope Francis leaves behind a fortune that makes his family cry. Initially, viewers thought this might be a spiritual message, perhaps a final blessing or theological reflection. But instead, what aired next felt more like a legal thriller. Waters unfolded the document, pointing to one line in particular. It confirmed the existence of a trust fund, managed quietly for over a decade, with specific instructions. It was to be left to one person, Maria Elena Bergoglio. On the screen appeared a summary, not overly detailed, but enough to make headlines. A Vatican-managed account. Regular deposits. Accrued interest. Though the final amount was undisclosed, experts speculated it reached the high six or even low seven figures. All of it, set aside for just one woman. Jesse Waters leaned in with a serious tone. This story wasn't just headlines, it was about purpose. According to insiders familiar with the situation, Pope Francis had spent years quietly redirecting unused papal stipends, proceeds from his books, and private donations into a special trust. But it wasn't for his own benefit. It wasn't for luxury or comfort. It was for his sister, the one he never stopped writing to, and for the community she remained devoted to. The internet lit up almost instantly. Social media users reacted with a blend of confusion, fascination, and heartfelt emotion. One person asked, "Why would a man who lived in near poverty leave behind a small fortune?" Another responded, "Because he wasn't storing it for himself, he was planting it for someone else." Back in Buenos Aires, Maria Elena opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from her brother. It didn't begin with formality or religious phrases. Instead, it simply started, "Herman Meneda, little sister." In the letter, Pope Francis thanked her for her strength, for her silence, and for the sacrifices she made over the years. He reminisced about their parents and their youth, especially one winter when, as teenagers, she gave him her only coat during a storm. "You gave me warmth," he wrote. "Now I return it." Enclosed with the letter were official documents. The trust was now legally hers, not just personally, but as chair of a joint board with local Argentine clergy. Its purpose? To fund healthcare and housing projects in their neighborhood. "This isn't wealth," he wrote. "It's love, just in another form." Maria Elena didn't cry because of the money. She cried because it was exactly what her brother would have done. Jesse Waters ended his report with a line that even surprised some of his usual critics. "Maybe the Pope never took a salary, but he found a way to turn silence into something loud, something that made his family cry for all the right reasons." But the story wasn't over. Far from it. Reactions from around the globe began pouring in. Many were filled with admiration, others with disbelief, and some even with suspicion. How could a pope so committed to simplicity and humility leave behind a trust big enough to fund a hospital wing? The Vatican responded quickly with a brief but firm statement. Pope Francis handled his personal finances, stipends and royalties, according to canon law. All distributions were approved through proper internal channels. Still, speculation continued. News outlets raced to uncover more. Headlines across Europe read Francis's final gift and the hidden fund of the people's pope. In Buenos Aires, news crews gathered outside Maria Elena's home. She refused interviews, but her neighbors spoke on her behalf. One woman, a longtime friend, said, "She always told us she needed nothing from him, only his safety. And now he's given her everything." The story quickly went viral online, not because of how much money was involved, but because of who gave it, and how. People were stunned to see a religious leader handle finances in a way that truly reflected his values. There were no luxury cars, estates, or art collections. One comment summed it up perfectly: he gave it to someone who would make sure it stayed where his heart always was. Still, not everyone reacted with admiration. Some questioned the optics. A Vatican analyst asked, if this trust existed, why was it never made public? Critics raised concerns about transparency, an especially sensitive issue in a church long plagued by financial scandals. But even they admitted, it didn't look like Francis gained anything from it. If anything, he had deliberately distanced himself from the entire process. Attention also turned to the letter, which the family had partially shared at the request of a local archdiocese. In it, Francis wrote with stark honesty, "To serve the Church is to serve those who wait in silence." Maria Elena had waited in silence her entire life. This was for her, and for those she never stopped caring for. It wasn't grand or poetic. It was raw. It was deeply personal. Religious scholars noted how unusual this act was. Most popes leave behind legacies tied to doctrine, reform, or encyclicals, one Vatican historian remarked. Very few are remembered for a handwritten letter and a trust fund with no church name attached. But perhaps the most touching response came from an unexpected place: the younger generation of clergy. In Colombia, a group of young priests held a candlelight vigil and read the letter aloud. Inspired by what they called the Bergoglio method, they launched a fundraising campaign: quiet, anonymous giving with profound local impact. Even Jesse Waters circled back to the story days later. He replayed a clip from his earlier broadcast and reflected, "I've covered popes, politicians, and..." In the end, Pope Francis didn't just preach humility, he planted, he turned. Every unused check, every ignored benefit. Into something lasting, something personal, and when he passed it wasn't the church that cried first, it was his sister. If a man who gave up everything still found a way to give even more in the end, what does that say about the legacy we choose to leave behind?